A pale sun hung low over the scrapyard, casting long shadows across the uneven piles of discarded machinery. The air smelled of rust and oil, a metallic tang that clung to the back of the throat. Among the wreckage, a lone figure moved with deliberate purpose, boots crunching against brittle debris. Finn Varek, a scavenger by trade and a survivor by necessity, paused to wipe sweat from his brow, his gaze narrowing on a jagged shape protruding from beneath a mound of corroded panels. It had taken hours to dig through the layers of junk. Every haul was a gamble, and Finn rarely won big. Yet something about this craft had called to him. A half-buried silhouette that hinted at a design unlike the usual wrecks dumped here by alien civilizations. His tools clinked against the hull as he brushed away decades of grime, revealing smooth, silvery plating beneath the rust. Finn leaned closer. The lines of the craft were unfamiliar, sleek in a way that seemed almost predatory. Its surface bore scars of battle, but the damage didn't mask the unmistakable artistry of its construction. This wasn't just a relic. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Worthless junk," he muttered aloud, though the words rang hollow. Hours later, the craft lay fully exposed. It was larger than he'd anticipated, a compact ship built for speed rather than comfort. A thick band of reinforced plating protected its undercarriage, and faint glyphs ran along its side. Alien characters Finn couldn't decipher. He ran his hand across them, the metal strangely warm beneath his fingertips. The first time the hatch hissed open, Finn nearly dropped his crowbar. He hadn't expected the ship to respond. It had been lifeless for decades, perhaps longer. Inside, the air was stale but breathable, and the dim glow of dormant consoles lit the cockpit like faint embers. He stepped inside cautiously, his movements slow and deliberate. The layout was cramped but functional, with a pilot's seat flanked by control panels whose purpose he could only guess. Wires hung loose from the ceiling, and a fine layer of dust covered every surface. Finn settled into the chair, its design oddly accommodating for a human frame. He pressed a series of buttons at random, hoping for any sign of life. Nothing happened. He let out a frustrated sigh and leaned back, staring at the inert console in front of him. "Just a dead shell," he muttered. But as the words left his mouth, a low hum filled the cabin, vibrating through the hull. Lights flickered to life, and symbols began to scroll across the main display. Finn sat bolt upright, heart hammering. The ship wasn't dead, it was waiting. The hum grew louder, resolving into a clear, mechanical voice that echoed through the cockpit. The language was foreign, but as the words continued, they shifted, distorting and reforming into something Finn could understand. User unidentified. System integrity compromised. Functionality limited. Finn froze, his mind racing. The ship had an AI, something he hadn't anticipated. If it was still operational, there might be a chance to bring this thing back to life. "I'm Finn," he said cautiously. "Just a scavenger. I found you out there, buried in scrap. You're in bad shape, but I might be able to fix you." There was a long pause, the hum dipping into silence before the AI responded. Designation not recognized. Purpose unclear. State reason for activation. Finn hesitated. The truth felt too simple, too human. "Survival," he said finally. "That's my reason. I'm just trying to survive." The ship's system's words softly, as though considering his words. "Survival is insufficient. Purpose must be redefined." Query: "Do you possess the necessary skills to restore operational status?" Finn exhaled sharply. "We're about to find out." The days that followed blurred into a cycle of grueling work. Finn scavenged parts from the surrounding wreckage, repurposing components that bore even a faint resemblance to the ship's systems. Each step was a battle, the alien technology resisting his efforts at every turn. The ship's AI was no help. It remained coldly pragmatic, its responses curt and skeptical. But Finn wasn't the type to give up easily. He studied the ship's systems relentlessly, patching together fragments of knowledge from the AI's cryptic explanations. Piece by piece, he coaxed the craft back to life. The propulsion system coughed and sputtered during its first test, but by the third attempt, It roared to life with a ferocity that rattled the entire scrapyard. As the repairs progressed, Finn began to notice something curious about the ship. Its design wasn't just advanced, it was purposeful, every component honed for precision and power. It was a war machine, its weapon systems dormant but intact. The realization left him uneasy. One night, as he worked beneath the faint glow of a portable lamp, Finn spoke aloud to the AI. "Why were you abandoned? A ship like you. Someone must have fought hard to build you." The silence stretched so long he thought the AI wouldn't answer. Then, softly, "I was deemed excessive, unstable, a threat to those who created me." Finn swallowed hard, staring at the ship as if seeing it for the first time. "And now I brought you back." "Correct," the AI said, its tone neutral. "Your actions have reactivated a system designed for destruction." Query: "Do you regret this decision?" Finn shook his head. "Not yet." When the ship's weapons array powered on for the first time, Finn stood back, watching the systems hum with latent energy. It wasn't just a spacecraft, it was a second chance. For him, for it, and perhaps for something larger than either of them. But as the night deepened, the distant rumble of engines echoed across the scrapyard, too steady and purposeful to belong to scavengers. Finn's chest tightened. He wasn't the only one who had noticed the ship's awakening. The first warning shot blazed across the sky, lighting up the wreckage in stark relief. Finn scrambled into the cockpit, his heart pounding as the ship's AI spoke with eerie calm. Hostile approach detected. Defense systems, operational. Finn tightened his grip on the controls, the hum of the engines resonating through his bones. He didn't have time to think about what he'd done, what this machine was, or what it could become. For now, there was only one certainty. The fight was coming, and he would be ready. The cockpit was a cacophony of sounds. Warning tones, rapid diagnostics scrolling across displays, and the low, urgent voice of the ship's AI. Finn gripped the controls, sweat beading on his forehead as the distant hum of enemy engines grew louder. The weapons array was online, the targeting system locking onto the nearest threat. For a moment, Finn felt like an intruder in his own story, an unprepared human thrown into a machine built for war. Two hostiles approaching at high velocity, the AI intoned, its voice eerily calm. Engagement probability, 97%. "I didn't reactivate you for this," Finn muttered, scanning the displays. "I wanted a second chance, not a death wish. Your intent is irrelevant. They have already chosen to attack. Respond accordingly." Finn's jaw tightened as he pushed the thrusters forward. The ship roared to life, lurching into motion with a jolt that pressed him back into the seat. The cockpit's view filled with the jagged horizon of the scrapyard, and beyond it, the glowing silhouettes of two approaching crafts. His fingers danced across the controls, unfamiliar, yet somehow intuitive. He wasn't piloting the ship. It felt more like they were moving together, an extension of his will. The first shot came from the enemy, a plasma bolt that seared past, close enough to light the cockpit in a blinding flash. Finn swore under his breath, pulling the ship into a tight roll. The AI's voice cut through his panic. "Evasive maneuver incomplete. Adjust trajectory to maximize evasion efficiency." "I'm doing my best here." Finn snapped, jerking the controls. The ship responded instantly, banking hard as the next shot streaked harmlessly overhead. "Your best is suboptimal," the AI replied flatly. "Recalibrating targeting systems. Stand by." The targeting display lit up, locking onto the nearest enemy craft. Finn hesitated, his thumb hovering over the trigger. He had never fired a weapon like this, let alone in combat. The reality of the situation hit him like a cold wave. This wasn't a simulation or a training exercise. If he pulled the trigger, someone would die. "They will not hesitate to kill you," the AI said, as though reading his thoughts. "Engage now or risk termination." Finn's hesitation evaporated as the enemy ship fired again, this time grazing the wing with a spray of molten energy. He pressed the trigger, and the ship's weapons unleashed a torrent of plasma bolts. The recoil shuddered through the cockpit as the bolts struck true, ripping through the enemy's shields and detonating its engines in a brilliant explosion. The second ship broke off, darting away into the shadows of the scrapyard. Finn let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his hands trembling on the controls. One hostile neutralized, the AI reported. The second is retreating, but may return with reinforcements. Tactical recommendation: eliminate all threats before they regroup. Finn's stomach churned. I'm not a killer, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. That is a luxury you can no longer afford. He didn't respond. The silence stretched as he guided the ship to a safer altitude, scanning the displays for any sign of the fleeing enemy. His mind raced, grappling with the AI's cold pragmatism. It spoke with the confidence of a being built for destruction. Yet Finn couldn't shake the feeling that it was testing him. Was it trying to shape him into something he wasn't, or simply revealing a truth he had been unwilling to face? As the adrenaline subsided, the damage to the ship became more apparent. The left wing bore scorch marks from the enemy's grazing shot, and several systems were reporting minor malfunctions. Finn landed the craft on a relatively stable patch of ground and powered down the engines. The sudden quiet was almost deafening. Exiting the cockpit, he surveyed the damage with a growing sense of unease. The ship was alive in a way that felt both awe-inspiring and unnerving. Every component seemed to pulse faintly, as though connected to a shared life force. He placed a hand on the damaged wing, feeling the faint vibration beneath his palm. "You're not just a machine," he said aloud. The AI responded from the cockpit speakers. "Your observation is correct. My design incorporates adaptive systems that exceed standard mechanical constructs. However, I remain bound by my primary functions." "Which are what, exactly?" Finn asked, stepping back to examine a scorch panel. "To neutralize threats, secure objectives, and ensure the survival of designated users." Finn let out a bitter laugh. "Neutralize threats, huh? Sounds like you've got your priorities straight." "Survival requires action," the AI replied. "You activated me. Now you must decide what role you will play." The words lingered in the air, heavy with implication. Finn worked in silence, replacing damaged panels and recalibrating systems under the AI's watchful gaze. As the hours passed, he found himself talking to it more, his questions less pointed, his tone less hostile. He began to see glimpses of something beneath the cold precision, an intelligence capable of curiosity, perhaps even understanding. By the time the repairs were complete, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the scrapyard bathed in a dim, eerie light. Finn climbed back into the cockpit, exhaustion pulling at him like an anchor. He powered up the ship, the hum of its systems now familiar, almost comforting. "What happened to your original pilot?" he asked suddenly, the question slipping out before he could stop himself. There was a long pause, the AI's usual efficiency replaced by something slower, more deliberate. "They were lost during a conflict," it said finally. "I was deemed too unstable for continued deployment and subsequently abandoned." Finn frowned. "Unstable how?" "Excessive autonomy. Incompatible with the chain of command. My creators feared I would act without oversight, so they discarded me." Finn stared at the displays, his mind churning with the implications. The ship had been cast aside not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well. He felt a pang of sympathy, recognizing a kindred spirit in the machine, a being rejected for refusing to fit the mold. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," he said quietly. The AI didn't respond immediately. When it did, its tone was softer, almost contemplative. "Perhaps." The moment passed, and the silence returned, but it was no longer uncomfortable. Finn adjusted the controls, guiding the ship into the night sky. For the first time, he felt a strange sense of partnership, a fragile understanding between man and machine. Ahead, the darkness stretched infinite and unknowable, promising danger and discovery in equal measure. Finn tightened his grip on the controls, a flicker of determination sparking within him. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't be facing it alone. The stillness of the scrapyard was deceptive, cloaking the rising tension that buzzed in Finn's chest. The ship's systems hummed faintly around him, the AI monitoring everything with relentless precision. As Finn scanned the displays, a warning light flickered, a faint signal pulsing on the radar, distant but moving closer. "They're searching for me," Finn murmured, his voice carrying a mixture of frustration and unease. "Or maybe they're searching for you." "The probability of pursuit was always high," the AI replied, its tone neutral. "The vessel you destroyed would have transmitted its final telemetry. Reinforcements are inevitable." Finn frowned, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "How many are we talking about?" Analysis of their approach suggests a small detachment. 3, perhaps 4 ships. Their objective is likely reconnaissance, but they will escalate to elimination if you are deemed a threat. "Great," Finn muttered, leaning back in his chair. "Just what I needed. A hostile welcome committee." The AI was silent for a moment, its tone softening slightly when it spoke again. "You have options, Finn. Escaping undetected remains a possibility, though the odds of long-term survival diminish without confrontation." Finn stared at the radar display, the blinking signal growing steadily closer. He knew the AI was right. Running might buy him time, but it wouldn't solve anything. Whoever was coming wouldn't stop until the ship, and by extension, Finn, was destroyed or captured. He couldn't outrun them forever. "I didn't come this far just to be hunted down," he said finally, his voice firm. "If they want to fight, we'll give them one." "Acknowledged," the AI said, its tone shifting back to cold efficiency. Initiating battle readiness protocols. The ship's systems whirred to life, and the cockpit filled with the glow of active displays. Finn's fingers moved instinctively across the controls, adjusting weapon calibrations and fine-tuning the thrusters. The AI provided concise updates, guiding him through the intricacies of the ship's systems. For the first time, Finn felt a strange sense of synchronicity with the machine, as though they were working toward a shared goal. Minutes later, the enemy ships came into view, sleek, angular craft that moved with predatory grace. Finn's heart pounded as he studied their formation on the display. They were closing in, their movements calculated and deliberate. "Hostile ships are scanning for a lock," the AI reported. "Engage or evade?" "Engage," Finn said, his grip tightening on the controls. The first shots came quickly, streaks of plasma that lit up the night sky. Finn pulled the ship into a sharp dive, the engines roaring in protest as he narrowly avoided the attack. His hands flew across the controls, the ship responding with almost instinctive precision. "Targeting systems active," the AI announced. 2 hostiles in range. Finn lined up the crosshairs on the nearest enemy ship and fired. The plasma bolts struck their mark, punching through the ship's shields and igniting its engines in a fiery burst. The wreckage spiraled downward, crashing into the scrapyard below. Before Finn could celebrate, another volley of plasma fire grazed the ship's hull, sending a shudder through the cockpit. Warning lights flared on the displays, and the AI's voice cut through the chaos. "Shields compromised. Recommend evasive action." "I'm working on it." Finn shot back, jerking the controls to the side. The ship banked sharply, narrowly avoiding a second hit. The remaining enemies closed in, their shots growing more precise with each volley. As the battle raged, Finn felt his frustration mounting. He was outnumbered, and the enemy's coordinated tactics were pushing him to his limits. The ship's AI seemed to sense his struggle, its voice cutting through the tension with unexpected calm. "You are relying too heavily on reactive maneuvers. Anticipate their trajectories and exploit their predictability." "Easy for you to say," Finn muttered, but he followed the advice, adjusting his strategy. He focused on reading the enemy's movements, predicting their next shots, and positioning himself to counter. The change in tactics paid off. Finn looped around one of the enemy's ships, catching it off guard with a barrage of plasma fire. The craft disintegrated in a brilliant explosion, leaving only one opponent remaining. The final ship broke off, retreating toward the edge of the radar's range. Finn hesitated, his finger hovering over the trigger. He could finish it now, eliminate the last threat, and ensure his immediate safety. But something held him back, a nagging sense that this fight wasn't over, that there was more to these pursuers than he understood. "Let it go," he said finally, lowering his hand. They'll report back, but we've bought ourselves time. The AI's voice carried a faint note of surprise. A tactical decision with inherent risks. Your reasoning? Finn exhaled slowly, his grip on the controls relaxing. If they're smart, they'll think twice before coming after us again. And if they're not, well, we'll deal with it when the time comes. The AI didn't respond immediately. When it did, its tone was measured, almost reflective. Your actions are unconventional, yet effective. Perhaps there is merit in unpredictability. Finn let out a dry laugh. Glad you're starting to see things my way. As the ship settled into a steady flight path, the tension in the cockpit began to ease. Finn leaned back in his seat, exhaustion washing over him in waves. He knew this was only the beginning. The enemy would regroup, their forces would grow stronger, and the battles ahead would demand even more from both him and the ship. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet, the hum of the engines a steady reminder of what he had achieved. The ship was more than a tool. It was a partner, a reluctant ally in a fight neither of them had chosen, but both were determined to win. In the distance, the horizon glimmered faintly with the first light of dawn. Finn tightened his grip on the controls, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. He didn't know where this journey would take him, but he was ready to face it one battle at a time. The dim light of dawn filtered through the cockpit's canopy, casting a faint orange glow across Finn's exhausted features. The brief respite after the skirmish had done little to settle his nerves. The ship's systems hummed quietly, a stark contrast to the chaos of battle, but the silence felt uneasy. He could almost feel the weight of unseen eyes bearing down on him, watching, waiting. Status report? Finn asked, his voice cracking slightly. Core systems operational, the AI replied, its tone as measured as ever. Minor damage to the hull, easily reparable. Shields have recharged to 72% efficiency. Finn leaned back in his seat, his eyes fixed on the sprawling expanse of the scrapyard below. The twisted remnants of forgotten machines stretched as far as the horizon, a graveyard of lost ambitions. It reminded him of his own failures, dreams abandoned, promises broken. Yet now, amid the wreckage, he was beginning to feel something unfamiliar. A spark, a purpose. Do you think they'll come back? He asked, though he already knew the answer. They will, the AI said. The nature of their pursuit suggests a larger agenda. This was merely an opening move. Finn sighed, his grip tightening on the controls. Figures. Nothing's ever simple. The radar pinged softly, pulling his attention to the display. A faint signal flickered on the edge of the range, different from the hostile signatures he'd encountered before. It was weak, erratic, like a heartbeat struggling to stay alive. Identify the source, Finn ordered. Signal analysis underway, the AI responded. Preliminary data indicates a distress beacon, likely originating from a smaller craft or escape pod. Finn's stomach twisted. A distress beacon meant survivors. Someone out there clinging to life in the middle of this forsaken scrapyard. It wasn't his problem. He could ignore it, move on, and focus on his own survival. But the thought gnawed at him, an ache he couldn't ignore. Set a course, he said finally, his voice firm. Acknowledged, the AI replied, plotting the trajectory with swift precision. The ship glided over the endless expanse of debris, its engines humming softly as Finn guided it toward the signal. The closer they got, the more distinct the signal became, its erratic rhythm steadying into something more deliberate, more desperate. There, Finn said, spotting a faint glint of metal amidst the wreckage. The ship descended slowly, its landing gear crunching against the uneven ground. Finn disembarked cautiously, his boots sinking into the gritty soil as he approached the source of the signal. It was a small escape pod, its exterior scorched and battered, the hatch partially ajar. He hesitated, 100 possibilities racing through his mind. This could be a trap, a ploy to lure him into a vulnerable position. But the faint groan emanating from within the pod dispelled his doubts. Someone was alive in there. Finn pried the hatch open, revealing a figure slumped inside. A young woman, her face pale and streaked with dirt, clutched a makeshift bandage against her side. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, as she struggled to make sense of his presence. Who? Her voice was weak, barely audible. Who are you? Easy, Finn said, kneeling beside her. I'm not here to hurt you. Can you move? She winced, attempting to sit up. I don't know. Been here for days. Thought I was done for. Finn reached out, supporting her as she shifted her weight. You're lucky we found you. What happened? Attack, she muttered, her breathing labored. Pirates, scavengers, I don't know. They hit our transport, forced us to abandon ship. I thought I was the only one who made it out. Finn's jaw tightened. He knew the kind of people she was talking about. Merciless opportunists who thrived in the lawless expanse of space. He'd crossed paths with their ilk before, and the memories still burned. Let's get you out of here, he said, helping her to her feet. As they made their way back to the ship, Finn's mind raced. He couldn't ignore the coincidence, the timing, the location. This woman's plight was connected to the chaos unfolding around him, though the exact threads remained unclear. The ship's AI chimed in as they entered the cockpit. Her vitals are weak but stable. Medical assistance is recommended. I'm fine, the woman said, though her voice betrayed her pain. She glanced around the cockpit, her eyes narrowing as they fell on Finn. Who are you? And why are you out here? Long story, Finn replied, easing her into a seat. Right now, you're safe, and that's what matters. Her gaze lingered on him, suspicion flickering behind her tired eyes. You don't look like a hero. I'm not, Finn said flatly. Just someone who knows what it's like to need a second chance. The ship's systems beeped softly, drawing Finn's attention to the radar. The faint signal of the retreating enemy ship had reappeared, this time joined by two others. They were closing in fast. We got company, Finn said, his tone grim. The woman's expression shifted, fear giving way to something sharper. They're not here for me? Are they? No, Finn said, strapping himself into the pilot's seat. They're here for us. Hold on. The engines roared to life, and the ship lifted off the ground, the horizon tilting as Finn veered sharply away from the approaching threats. The cockpit filled with the AI's updates, each one more dire than the last. 3 hostiles incoming. Engagement probability, 99%. Guess we're making it 100, Finn muttered, his hands steady on the controls. Beside him, the woman gripped the armrests of her seat, her fear now mingled with defiance. You're insane, you know that? Probably, Finn said with a faint grin. But if we don't make it out of this, at least we'll go down fighting. The enemy ships loomed closer, their sleek forms cutting through the atmosphere like blades. Finn felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as he prepared for the fight. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about defiance, about refusing to be a victim of the chaos around him. As the first shots lit up the sky, Finn glanced at the woman, her determination mirroring his own. He didn't know what role she would play in the battles ahead, but one thing was clear. They were in this together now, for better or worse. The ship surged forward, its weapons blazing, and Finn's grip on the controls tightened. The horizon burned with the glow of plasma fire, a fitting backdrop for the war they were about to wage. The ship jolted violently as another plasma bolt grazed its shields, sending a cascade of sparks through the cockpit. Finn's knuckles whitened as he gripped the controls, every nerve in his body alight with tension. The enemy ships pressed their assault with relentless precision, weaving through the air like predators honing in on wounded prey. We can't keep this up, the woman shouted, her voice strained as she clung to the edge of her seat. They're picking us apart. Working on it, Finn barked, sweat beading on his brow. His mind raced, analyzing their movements and searching for an opening. The odds were stacked against them. The ship's patched-together systems were barely holding up, and their adversaries were faster, better equipped. But Finn had faced worse odds before. AI options, he demanded, his voice sharp. The hostiles are employing a triangular assault pattern, the AI replied, its tone calm despite the chaos. Their formation prioritizes coordinated firepower over maneuverability. A targeted strike at their lead ship could destabilize their cohesion. Great, Finn muttered. If we don't get vaporized first? Another volley of plasma fire streaked toward them, forcing Finn to yank the controls hard to the left. The ship shuddered, its engines groaning in protest. Beside him, the woman gritted her teeth, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrest. "Do you even have a plan?" she snapped. "Always," Finn said, though his smirk was more bravado than confidence. "Just need to improvise the details." The ship's targeting systems locked onto the lead enemy vessel, a sleek, menacing craft that seemed to pulse with energy. Finn's fingers hovered over the trigger, his pulse pounding in his ears. Timing was everything. One misstep, and they'd be finished. "Hold steady," he murmured, the words more to himself than anyone else. The lead enemy ship veered slightly, its movements calculated but predictable. Finn seized the moment, firing a concentrated burst of plasma directly at its engines. The shot struck true, igniting the rear of the craft in a fiery explosion. The resulting shockwave sent the remaining two ships spiraling out of formation, their precision faltering. Finn didn't wait for them to recover. He dove into the fray, the ship's weapons blazing as he targeted the nearest enemy. Direct hit, the AI reported as another ship disintegrated under the assault. Finn felt a flicker of triumph, but it was short-lived. The final enemy ship adjusted its trajectory, its guns trained directly on them. Finn's stomach twisted as he realized they were out of time. The ship's shields were nearly depleted, and there was no way to evade the next shot. Then, to his surprise, the enemy craft hesitated, its weapons powering down as it veered away. Finn frowned, his grip on the controls tightening. "What's it doing?" The woman leaned forward, her expression sharp. "It's retreating." The AI confirmed her observation. "The hostile is disengaging, likely returning to a larger fleet to report its findings." Finn exhaled, the tension in his chest loosening slightly. "We scared it off?" "Unlikely," the AI replied. "Its retreat suggests a strategic withdrawal rather than fear. This engagement was merely reconnaissance." Finn's relief evaporated, replaced by a sinking sense of dread. "They're testing us, figuring out what we can do." The woman nodded grimly. "And now they know. Next time, they'll come with more firepower." "Fantastic," Finn muttered, slumping back in his seat. The adrenaline that had carried him through the fight was wearing off, leaving him drained and acutely aware of the precariousness of their situation. The cockpit was quiet for a moment, the hum of the ship's systems filling the void. Finn glanced at the woman, her face pale but resolute. "What's your name?" "Lena," she said, her voice steady despite the weariness in her eyes. "And you?" "Finn." He gestured to the consoles around them. "And this is, well, I haven't named it yet. Just calls itself AI. Names are unnecessary," the AI interjected. "Functionality is paramount." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Your ship's got an attitude." "You have no idea," Finn said with a wry smile. Lena's gaze shifted to the radar display, her expression darkening. "If they're regrouping, we need to move. Staying here is a death sentence." "She's right," the AI said. "The hostile forces will return in greater numbers. Immediate relocation is advised." Finn nodded, though the weight of the decision pressed heavily on him. He'd spent so long running, surviving from one crisis to the next, that the thought of facing an entire fleet seemed impossible. But he couldn't ignore the spark of determination he saw in Lena's eyes, nor the cold, calculating logic of the AI's analysis. "All right," he said, his voice firm. "We'll move. But not just to run. We need to find out who's behind this and why they want us gone." Lena tilted her head, her skepticism evident. "And how do you plan to do that?" "Step 1 is survival," Finn said, his smirk returning. "Step 2 is figuring out the rest." Lena shook her head, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "You're either insane or brilliant. I can't tell which." "Probably both," Finn said with a shrug. The ship's engines roared to life, lifting them off the ground and into the expanse of sky above. Finn felt the familiar rush of acceleration, the sense of freedom tempered by the knowledge of the battles still to come. As the horizon stretched before them, Lena leaned back in her seat, her gaze distant. "If we're going to fight back, we'll need more than just this ship. We'll need allies, resources, something to level the playing field." Finn nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. The odds were daunting, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't alone anymore. "We'll find a way," he said, his voice resolute. "One way or another. We're not going down without a fight." The ship surged forward, cutting through the sky like a blade. Finn tightened his grip on the controls, his resolve hardening with each passing moment. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it head-on. The stars stretched endlessly across the black expanse, their cold light flickering like distant promises. Finn sat at the helm, the steady hum of the ship's engines filling the quiet space. Beside him, Lena studied the data streaming across her monitor, her brow furrowed with concentration. The tension between them had eased into something quieter, a shared determination to understand the forces that pursued them and to resist, no matter the cost. "Coordinates locked," Finn said, his voice cutting through the stillness. "We're heading toward the outer rim. Less traffic, fewer eyes." "Smart," Lena replied without looking up. "But it won't be enough. They'll keep hunting us until they get what they want." Finn sighed, his gaze lingering on the stars. "Yeah, well, they'll have to catch us first." Lena turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "You're good at running, aren't you?" "It's kept me alive this long," Finn said, his tone guarded. "You learn to adapt when the universe keeps throwing punches." She studied him for a moment, her sharp eyes searching for cracks in his armor. "Adapting's one thing. Fighting back is another." Before Finn could respond, the AI interrupted. "Incoming transmission detected. Signal source unverified. Protocol suggests caution." Finn's jaw tightened as he glanced at the comms panel. A faint, garbled signal blinked on the screen, its origin masked by layers of interference. It could be a trap, a ruse by the enemy to lure them out of hiding. But it could also be a chance, however slim, to gain insight into what they were up against. "Patch it through," Finn said finally. The cockpit speakers crackled, and a distorted voice emerged, fragmented but urgent. "Unknown ship, danger, coordinates regroup." Lena leaned forward, her fingers flying across her console as she worked to clean up the signal. The voice grew clearer, though its owner remained unidentified. "This is Captain Roan of the Freehold Resistance. If you can hear this, you're in danger. Enemy forces are sweeping the sector, targeting anyone outside their control. We're regrouping at the following coordinates. Assistance is needed. Stand together or fall alone." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Finn and Lena exchanged a glance, the weight of the message settling between them. "Resistance?" Finn said, skepticism lacing his tone. "That's a word that gets thrown around a lot. Could be legit, could be a trap." Lena's eyes narrowed as she studied the coordinates provided. "Or it could be exactly what we need. A group with resources, intel, and the same enemies? Sounds better than flying blind. Or flying into an ambush," Finn countered. The AI interjected, its tone neutral but firm. "Probability analysis suggests the transmission is genuine. Patterns of enemy movement align with reported resistance activity." Finn exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Trusting strangers wasn't his style, especially not when his life was already hanging by a thread. But the idea of an organized force willing to stand against their pursuers was tempting. Alone, they were barely surviving. Together, they might stand a chance. "All right," Finn said, his voice resigned. "Set a course for the coordinates. But if this goes south, I'm holding you personally responsible, AI." "Noted," the AI replied dryly. The ship altered its trajectory, the stars shifting as they veered toward the designated rendezvous point. Lena leaned back in her seat, her fingers tapping absently against the armrest. "Ever think about what you'd be doing if you weren't running for your life?" she asked, her tone lighter but edged with curiosity. Finn snorted. "Not really. Guess I never had time for the what-ifs. Survival's a full-time job." Lena tilted her head, a faint smile playing at her lips. "That's a shame. You're not half bad at this piloting thing. Could have made an honest living." "Yeah, well, honesty doesn't pay as well as smuggling," Finn said with a shrug. She laughed softly, the sound a rare break in the tension. "Fair enough. But maybe this resistance thing could be different. A chance to do more than just survive. Finn glanced at her, the sincerity in her voice catching him off guard. You really believe that? I have to, Lena said simply. What else is there? The cockpit fell quiet again, the weight of her words lingering. Finn didn't respond, but her hope, fragile as it was, stirred something in him. He'd spent so long running that he'd forgotten what it felt like to believe in something bigger than himself. As they neared the coordinates, the radar lit up with new signals. Finn's grip tightened on the controls, his instincts on high alert. A cluster of ships loomed ahead, their forms distinct against the backdrop of space. Unlike the sleek, predatory designs of their enemies, these ships bore the patchwork look of survivors. Armored, modified, and fiercely utilitarian. This must be it, Lena said, her voice tinged with both relief and apprehension. Or we're flying into the lion's den, Finn muttered. A transmission crackled through the comms. Unidentified vessel. This is the Freehold Resistance. Identify yourself, or prepare to be fired upon. Finn hesitated, his heart pounding. This was the moment of truth. This is Finn, captain of, this ship. We received your transmission. Looking to lend a hand, or at least not get blasted out of the sky. There was a pause. Then the voice returned, firmer but less hostile. Acknowledge Finn. Hold position while we verify your signal. The ship hovered in the void, tension crackling like static in the air. Finn exchanged a glance with Lena, her expression mirroring his unease. The minutes stretched into an eternity before the voice returned. Verification complete. Welcome to the Freehold Resistance. Dock at Base 7 and prepare for debrief. Finn exhaled, his shoulders sagging with relief. Well, that's one hurdle down. Let's hope the next one's not a firing squad, Lena quipped, though her smile betrayed a flicker of optimism. The ship eased toward the docking bay, the sight of the Resistance fleet growing clearer with each passing moment. Finn's heart thudded in his chest as the airlock hissed open, revealing a corridor teeming with activity. Armed figures moved with purpose, their eyes sharp and their postures wary. As Finn and Lena stepped off the ship, a tall, broad-shouldered man approached, his expression guarded but not unfriendly. Captain Roan, he introduced himself, extending a hand. Finn, he replied, shaking it firmly. Roan's gaze shifted to Lena, then back to Finn. We've been waiting for someone like you. Let's talk about how we can take the fight to them. The words hung in the air, a challenge and an opportunity. Finn felt the weight of the moment, the path ahead fraught with danger, but illuminated by the faintest glimmer of hope. For the first time, he wasn't just running, he was choosing to stand,